We are so inspired by you and so pleased that you're here. So we'll welcome you today, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I think I'm going to do without this. I do better. I can talk loud. And if you can't hear me, let me know. Do you have any trouble hearing me? Anybody? Okay, good. My name is Rachel Miller, but really it's Rachel in French. Goldman is my maiden name, and Miller is my married name. I was the youngest of 4 children, and I was the only one that was born in France. My family was from Warsaw, Poland. My father was a barber. My mother was a housewife. I had 2 brothers and a sister, and they went to school. They lived a very comfortable life in Warsaw. My father came from a family of 8. My mother came from a family of 13. And both of my grandmothers were living at the beginning of the war. My father decided to go to France, and the only reason he decided to go to France was because he had a brother and a sister living there, and my mother had 2 brothers. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in Warsaw, and they wanted him to serve in the Polish army, and he didn't want to. They went to Paris. I'll say Paris like the French, the way it should be. And when they got there, it must have been a shock for my mother, because she had a beautiful home in Warsaw, and now they were living in a 2-room apartment with no running water. We lived on the 1st floor, and she had to go up to the 2nd floor to get water. But we did have a toilet. And the bedroom was their room for my parents. The living room, dining room served as the bedroom at night. There was a little kitchen, a foyer, and of course the toilet. This was in 1932. And I arrived in 1933, and I'm sure it must have been quite a shock to my mother. Now I'm going to show you some pictures of my family. And let me see if I can use... This is my Aunt Rose, and you're going to hear a lot about her. This is her sister Eva, and I never met her. This is my paternal grandfather, and I did not know him. This is my brother Adolphe, and this is my paternal grandmother. This is my mother with one of her sisters, my mother with one of her sisters, and I don't know who this is. It's either a brother or a sister. This is my parents' engagement picture. And does anybody read Polish? This is, they were married in May of 1923. Oh my goodness. Pushing the wrong button. This is my mother, my brother Adolphe, my brother Henri, and my sister Sabine. And this is one of my mother's sisters. And I have a lot of her pictures, so I'm sure it was one of her favorites. And this is my maternal grandmother with my sister Sabine. This is my father, my mother, and this is my mother's brother, who I did know. He lived in Paris. I do not remember his wife's name, nor do I remember the children's name. My maternal grandmother, this is my brother Adolphe, Henri, and Sabine. This again, Warsaw, of course, my father, my mother, my paternal grandmother, my brother Adolphe, Henri, and Sabine. So I was born in 1933. From what I remember, I had a very, very happy childhood. We used to get together every Saturday night with my aunts, uncles, and cousins. We were a singing family. We'd have candy, ice cream, and whatever, and I didn't even know I was poor. I thought I was very rich because I had everything. It was one Sunday morning, and I was sitting on the buffet by the window, and I heard my father say to my mother, "It's the beginning of doom." Why it registered, I will never know, but it did. That was the day that Germany invaded Poland in 1939. I don't know whether or not they had communication. I have nothing to show me that they did, and I have nothing to show me that they didn't. Life was pretty much the same for us going on. We got together with our family and so forth and so on. And let me show you a little bit of France before I go on to the other little more. This is my father, my mother, my brother Adolphe, my brother Henri, Sabine, and that's me. That's Sabine, and that's me. And when I look at these two pictures, it warms my heart because she was one of my most favorite persons. And we were dressed alike. And it means an awful lot to me that we even shared that together. The reason I'm showing you these pictures is because in Europe, whether you are rich and poor, the month of August, everybody takes off and goes on vacation. This is my mother. This is my mother with my Aunt Rose. And these are my two brothers. It probably is a picture when they arrived from Warsaw, Poland. It's a school picture. This is my mother's other brother, whom I didn't know. His name was Jules. And this is his son, Michel. I remember him. And his wife's name was Fanny, but I do not remember the other three boys' names. This is Adolphe, Henri, Sabine, me. And this gal's name is Rachel, just like me, and I don't remember his name. This is the Jewish quarter in Paris, where they had temples and synagogues and where they could find all the food and where they congregated. August 1941, a beautiful, beautiful day. A lot of commotion in the courtyard. We had two huge wooden doors, and within this wooden doors there was a courtyard in the shape of a U, and we lived in building number A and B and C, and it went all the way around. Germans, SS, and French police. With that, Monsieur Martin, who lived across the way from us, my father used to cut his hair, came over, knocked at our door and said, "Monsieur Goldman, please come with me. They're picking up the Jews and taking them to a labor camp." My father didn't ask any questions. He picked up a suitcase and started to walk across the yard. When Monsieur Maurice in building number C saw my father, and he told the Germans and the French police that my father was trying to get away, and they picked him up right then and there. They came up to look for my two brothers. The reason I told you we had no running water is because we used to have one of these huge bathtubs. My mother hid my brother Adolphe and Henri under the bed and put this bathtub in front of them. I'm sure that the inspector, when he came up, must have seen them. It would have been impossible for him not to, but decided not to see them. On that day, my father, his brother Leon was taken, my two uncles, Jules and Aaron, and my Aunt Rose's husband was taken. And he was actually taken by mistake. Why do I say that? The French government made a deal with Hitler that they could come into France, pick up the Jews, but the French government protected the French Jew. My Uncle Salomon was born in a place called Drancy, which you will hear a little more about. As I mentioned before, we used to get together. None of us were rich. We didn't have telephone. People had telephones, but we didn't. People had cars. We didn't. Means of transportation was either walking, bus, or the metro. But we basically lived within the same walking area. So my Uncle Salomon heard that something was going on, so he started walking towards our house. And he was stopped in the street by the Germans. And they said, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to see my family." "Where were you born?" "I was born in France." "Drop your pants." And because he was circumcised, he too was taken away. Well, of course, we didn't have our Saturday get-together. I don't have any communication from my father, but I do have communication from my aunt, from her husband. I did forget, one thing I forgot to tell you is that my father served in the French army. There he is. This was the day that the Germans came into France. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I just stopped myself. Where was I? Can someone remind me where I was? They took my two uncles, and this was before. I jumped ahead of myself. Let me go back. I heard about this wonderful parade as a child. I ran downstairs, and I wiggled myself in front of everybody. And that's the day that the Germans entered France, which was June 23rd, 1940. When I saw them in their gray greenish uniform, their tanks, their motorcycles, their tanks, the precision in which they were walking, they were on horses, I became terrified. I ran upstairs and I started to cry. And my family said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm afraid. That's all I kept saying. I'm afraid. That was the day that France let the Germans in to France. And Hitler made a deal with Pétain. Pétain made a deal with Hitler, I don't know which was which. If they came into France and they didn't bomb us, they would welcome them with open arms, and that's exactly what they did. The French opened their open arms and tell the Germans, "You are welcome, come into our city." A year later, going back now to the month of August, 1941, that was the day when my father and his brothers and his brother-in-law were taken away. They were taken to a place called Drancy, which is where my uncle was born. Anybody reads French? This is a letter from my uncle to his wife. It says, "Dear wife and daughter, I received your card, and I also received the package, and I'm happy to hear that everybody is good. This is my father's name, Nathan. He also received a letter from his wife, and he also received a package. And it goes on, it was food, and which they need very badly. And what they're asking for, he's asking for soap, he's asking for a razor, shaving cream, a comb, a handkerchief, and he's asking about his brothers and his sister, even the superintendent of the building. And lastly, he's asking for cigarettes. He was a smoker. I don't know how my mother nor my aunt got them out, but somehow they got them out of that camp of Drancy. They were taken to l'hôpital Tenot, which is on the right bank of Paris. It was a Catholic hospital whereby they both had major surgery and did very, very, very well. Now the Germans had constant edict, and the new edict was that only the French Jews could stay in that hospital. All the others had to move. So my father was taken in an open wagon to l'hôpital Rothschild, which was a Jewish hospital, in the beginning of December, in an open wagon. And I think he developed hepatitis, something like that, I'm not quite sure. The good thing about it is we were allowed to see him 3 times a week. So my mother would go one day, another time she would take my 2 brothers, and another time she would take Sabine and I. We went to see him on December 28th, 1941. We were so excited. I was. My father was coming home New Year's Day. As far as I was concerned, we would have our Saturdays get together again. We would be singing, and we'd have the ice cream, and we'd have everything we had before. My mother went to see him 2 days later, on the 30th. He told her that at 10 o'clock in the morning, he had been injected with something. He became very ill, and he died in her arms. Tuesday, December 30th, at 2 o'clock, 1941. My uncle, who was at l'Hôpital Tenon on the other side of Paris, told my Aunt Rose that at 10 o'clock in the morning, he had been injected with something. He became very ill, and he died in her arms that same day, Tuesday, December 30th, 1941, at 2 o'clock. We couldn't figure out how one knew that the other had died. Finally, we understood that both had died. They had a huge funeral. They were the first Jews to die under the German occupancy, German time. Excuse me a minute. Do I have any questions so far? Anyway, I have to tell you that there was no Saturday get-togethers anymore. Everything changed. The house was very sad, and nothing was good. Before I go on, let me tell you about the Jewish people. A lot of people said they went like sheep. They didn't go like sheep. They went and they fought. This is my brother. Oh, this is my brother Adolphe. This is my cousin Hélène, and I have to tell you about her. In 1944, she was taken French prisoner of war. She was carrying 17 false identification cards and 17 guns. She was tortured. She never spoke. And she has 2 holes in between her breasts, compliments of the SS. This is Jean, a friend of theirs. And they were fighting in the underground. And this is my brother again, but I do not know the other 3 gentlemen. So they did fight. They fought the best way that they knew how. School was coming to an end, and my mother said to me, Rachel, I'm going to send you to the country. I was so happy. I wanted to get away from that sadness. I wanted back what we had. So she said to me, you're going to go away with Cecile, my best friend, and the other important person in my life, my sister Sabine. We were supposed to leave on the 13th. However, Sabine's birthday was July the 15th, and my Aunt Rose promised her a handbag, and she would not give it to her unless she was in Paris to receive it. So Cecile and I left on the 13th. We arrived at this farm, and it was lovely, open air, and the animals. It was just lovely. A couple days later, kids came up, and they started to talk about this raid that they're going to have, and they're going to pick up the Jews. I became terrified. I went in my bed. I started to cry and covered my head with the blanket, and I guess I must have fallen asleep. On the 18th, I went to the bus to meet Sabine. Instead of Sabine coming, it was Cecile's mother, Madame Thiel. And I said to her, where is Sabine? She said she went shopping. And I started to ask all kinds of questions, and she said to me, you're being very belligerent, I'm going to tell your mother, and so forth and so on. But lastly, I said to her, where is my doll? She says, what doll? I said, Sabine was supposed to bring my doll, I forgot it. She says, well, she didn't give it to me. So when we started walking towards the farm, and what seemed like minutes, I ran in. I was 9 years old, and I said, if you don't tell me what happened to my family, I'm going to run away to Paris. So Madame Thiel told me that on July the 16th, early morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, my mother, my 2 brothers, and my sister were picked up and taken away. I was angry at my mother. Why didn't she keep me with her? She didn't love me. And who's going to take care of me? Under an assumed name. Of course my mother loved me. She saved my life. So I was there for a month, couldn't hear anything. I was so frightened. A month later, I got a letter from my Aunt Rose. And she told me she was in hiding with my cousin Arlette. And as soon as it would be safe, she would take me back to Paris. Forgot to tell you what my father and my uncle were injected with. They were injected with gas. They were experimented. I found this out 40 years ago. When I came back, when it was time for me to get back to Paris, I wanted to go to my house. And we got to the house, and that's when they were looting our apartment. I asked permission if I could go upstairs to take the pictures, and they kept saying no. But Madame Thiel was from Alsace-Lorraine, and she spoke German. And she told them, "You're going to burn the pictures anyway. Why don't you let her go upstairs and get the pictures?" So as a result, at the age of 9 years old, I went upstairs, I got the pictures of my family, and I'm one of the very few child survivors that has pictures of her family. Within the pictures, you saw the announcement, my parents' wedding announcement. There was a pair of earrings and a bracelet that belonged to my mother. And then there was a duvet on the blanket, on the bed, and there was a high window. My aunt threw it over the garage, and when I got married, she made 2 pillows for me out of the duvet that belonged to my parents. Life was very, very different now. This is my Aunt Rose, my father's sister. This is her daughter. We call each other sisters because we were brought up together. This is Arlette over here. And this is the last picture of Sabine and I. And as you can see, we're dressed alike there too. While I was at my aunt's, there was a knock at the door. It was a German soldier in civilian clothes. He came and brought a letter for my sister. Before being in this camp, they were in a place called Val d'Hiver, which would be, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Savas Center. You know, you put 12,000 people there for 5 days without air conditioning, without food, and how few bathrooms they are. Well, that's what the condition that they were in. And then they were sent to this camp called Pithiviers, which is about 250 kilometers outside of Paris. And she writes. And you know when you write and you're sad, you're upset about something, and tears are rolling down your eyes and everything gets smudged? That's what the letter was full of, smudges. She writes how they shaved her hair, how they shaved my mother's beautiful black hair, and her brother and my brother Adolphe and Henri. They gave him this striped uniform and clogs. They gave him a star that said Jew and gave them a number on their arm. She was hungry and she was sick, and she wanted to get out. This soldier wanted to marry her. She was now 15 years old. My aunt said, "Bring her out, and I will let you marry her." By the time he went back after the 3rd letter, she was on a convoy to Auschwitz, and that was the last that I heard from Sabine. I don't have the letters because my aunt burnt them. I used to find them, and I used to cry, and I was hysterical. So she did a terrible thing. She burnt the 3 letters. But this one is imprinted in my head. Any questions? I was living with my aunt now, and an edict came out. Anyone over the age of 6 years old had to wear the star. The star had to be on the left side, and it had to be at a certain height and sewn in a certain way. And if it wasn't sewn in a certain way, in a certain height, you could be taken away and deported. It said Jew on it. In French, God bless you, it says, in French, it's Juif, Juif. What did that mean? It meant that we had a curfew of 8 o'clock at night. My aunt was rich, she had a radio. The radio was taken away. Arlette, who was 3.5 years old, had a tricycle. That was taken away from her because she was a menace to society with that tricycle. We were only allowed to shop between the hours of 3 and 4 for groceries. We were not allowed to go to the movies, not allowed to have radio, I already mentioned that. The food that we had, the ration that we had, everything was black. I don't know how they managed to do that, but even potatoes were black. Soap was black. Everything was black. To this day, I don't eat a banana that has a brown spot in it because during the war, they had dried bananas and it looked like feces. That's just what it looked like. And the milk was like chalk. The meat that we had was horse meat. We used to get that twice a week. My aunt was sick this particular time, and from the cold, my hands and my feet used to crack open and bleed. I was waiting online, and it was 5 minutes to 4, and I very gingerly tapped this lady, and I says, "Excuse me, madam," I says, "but I've been waiting here." And she looked at my star and she said, "You filthy little Jew, you have the audacity to tell me that I haven't been waiting in this line for I'm going to call the Germans over here and they're going to take you away." And of course they walked around with police dogs. And I started to cry and I begged. I was practically on my hands and knees. And I walked back and I could not get any groceries. And I promised to speak up when the war was over. It was so cold, that the walls in her bedroom they used to sweat. Water used to come down. That's how cold it was. We were allowed to go to school sometimes. My aunt was allowed to work sometimes. Every time she heard about a possible raid, we went into hiding. This time we went into hiding in the cellar for 5 days in the dark with rodents riding around. To this day, I'm terrified of mice. I was terrified of the dark till I was 40. I was terrified of dogs till I was 50. I wet the bed till I was 13 and a half. You lived in constant fear. Finally, we came upstairs. This time, I was with my aunt, so my name was Rachel. The only time my name would change is when I was in hiding in a different place, when I wasn't with my aunt. When things were getting bad, my aunt sent us into a convent. So we were there for 1.5 years, and my name there was, of course, Christine, like my friend Christine. And we were there, and then they wanted me to be baptized and have my communion. And my aunt would not take that responsibility upon herself, so she took us out. My aunt would have a dream. We would be waiting online. Her husband was dead, of course. And every time it came to us, her husband would put out his arm and said, "This is enough for today." And we would find out that there had been a raid. You couldn't even be friends with anybody because you didn't know whether they were going to be there tomorrow. Everybody was afraid for themselves. Her in-laws were at the same hospital that my father died from. We went to see them. That was the day, they were probably in their 70s or 80s. That was the day that they were taking them out of the hospital. And they just pulled the plug and let them die with dignity. No, they couldn't let them die with dignity. They stacked them one on top of the other like dirty laundry. The one in the top was the only one that probably had a chance to live. I saw women throwing themselves out the window. I saw women killing their own children. Because when people went away, we didn't hear from them. It was a horrific time. I kept thinking my brothers were strong. I'm sure that wherever they are, they're going to come back. I was worried about my mother because my mother wasn't well. But I thought my sister was so beautiful, surely she'll be okay. Everything kept getting worse. They kept taking the Russians, they kept taking the Hungarians, they took the German Jews, the Polish Jews, the Hungarian Jews, Romanians, and so forth and so on. The only ones basically that were left was the French Jews. And my aunt was getting very nervous because at this time, what was going to happen to us? And it was really actually towards the end of the war, or the beginning of towards the end of the war. This is my father's grave. This is my aunt. This is me. This is Arlette. This is my uncle's sister and his niece. This is Arlette and I. In this grave, they have 30 coffins, one on top of the other. What happened is that my aunt was getting really very nervous. So she decided to put us into an orphanage in a place called Le Mans dans la Sarthe. It was a chateau. And there were about 60 children. I am here. I am here. I'm not in this picture. All of these children, three parents came back out of all these children. All the others are all orphans. The war was coming to an end, June 1944. Thank God, thank God. The war was over in May of 1945. We went back to Paris, waiting to see who's coming back. There were a lot of similarity in names, but nobody came back. I lost 93 people in the war. The Germans killed 23 million people, of which 6 million were Jews. 1.5 million of the 6 million were children. They killed gays. They killed gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses. They killed 3 million Russians. They killed the handicapped, the mentally ill. They killed for the sake of killing. They wanted blonde and blue-eyed people. We heard what they did to the people. You know that they made, out of people's skin, they made lampshades. They made soap out of people's skin. You know what they did with the hair? They filled them with mattresses. They just killed. So the war was over, and I was really an orphan. I was living with my aunt, and in the orphanage, I met this American soldier. There was actually 3 soldiers that wanted to bring me to the United States. They wanted to adopt me. I was the star of the orphanage. I came to America in 1946. He brought me to America. Unfortunately, he molested me, and his wife threw me out. At the beginning, I was very angry at her, but I know now that she was absolutely right to throw me out. I was in 5 different foster homes until I married my husband. And I had a very, very nice life. I lost a son from AIDS. He died. He was gay. He died in December 23rd, 1992, which was 18 years ago. In 2001, the American Red Cross came to me. The Russians had opened their archives and gave me these documents. I want you to note something so I can talk to you about it. This is for my, oh goodness, Goldman Raja, which was for Helen, her name was Helen, Hélène. She was born 1901, Varsovie means Warsaw, Paris, to Camp Pithiviers, Juden, the Germans had different names for that, to concentration camp in Auschwitz on the 6th and 7th of August, 1942. Goldman Abraham Fradolf, he was born April 20th, 1924 in Warsaw, to Nuta and Raja Rabinovich, that was my mother's name. Paris 11e, rue du Faubourg Saint-Antoine, 275, to Camp Pithiviers, Jude. To concentration camp in Auschwitz on the 30th, 31st July 1942, died there on the 17th of October 1942 at 9:30 p.m. Cause of death, enteritis with bodily weakness. There was no cause of death for my mother. Did you notice that? This is for my brother Henri. Goldman Henri, the 29th of August 1926, Warsaw, Nathan Raja Rabinovich, Paris 11e, Faubourg Saint-Antoine 275. You to concentration camp on the 31st July 1942, died there on the 5th of January 1943 at 4:25 p.m., cause of death, myocardial weakness. This is for Sabine. Goldman Sabine, July 15th, 1929, Paris. That's not true, she was born in Warsaw. Paris 275, Faubourg Saint-Antoine, to Camp Pithiviers, Juden, to concentration camp Auschwitz on the 19th of August, 1942. There is no cause of death for my mother and my sister. What the Germans did, in order to cover themselves, they would take a medical book and take out a terminology which sounded logical to them, and they would put it on the death certificates, so that you would know that they didn't die of starvation or whatever it was. What it also meant is that when they were taken to Camp Pithiviers, to Auschwitz, they would put them in a cattle car. In this cattle car, they would group them by gender, by country, by age, by children. So when they arrived at Auschwitz, I call it a bill of lading. When they arrived at Auschwitz, they would know, basically, when they opened up the cattle car, because about 200 were standing, they were standing in the cattle car with a small window and a pot. who would be capable to work and who would not be able to work. When they arrived at the camp, they had an orchestra that played for them. And they had a sign that says, Arbeit macht frei. Arbeit macht frei, yeah. Which means that work makes you free. Then they would say the ones that were well enough, pardon me, the ones that were well enough to work would, let's say, go to the right, and the ones that couldn't work would go to the left. They would send them to the showers, pardon me. And there again there would be music. They would tell them to fold their clothes very carefully and tell them to tie their shoes very carefully, because when they would come out of the showers, they would find their clothes. But in reality, they were being gassed. I went through the camp. On the walls, you can see the fingernails on the walls of people trying to grasp the last breath of air. Such inhumanity. Can you imagine working and smoke burning and going home at night and being with your family and eating and listening to music and make believe like nothing existed? How did it happen? The world was silent. There was a ship called the St. Louis. It had 969 people aboard. In 1941, came to New York, and it was sent back. Actually, some of those people survived, but a lot of them were killed. FDR knew of what happened because when they had the Warsaw Ghetto, a person escaped with pictures and brought it to the United States in 1942. The Secretary of State at the time, I don't remember his name, told FDR, and they made believe that they did not exist. Eleanor Roosevelt, they claimed that she saved 1,000 children. In reality, she saved 100 children. The world stood silent. What are we doing today? Are we not doing what they did in World War II? Look what goes on in Darfur, Ethiopia, the Congo. What do we do? What are we going to do? Does someone have the answer? Hatred for people. I can't understand it. I just can't. You're all adults. Do any of you have suggestions? What are we going to do about it? We need to do something about it. We can't allow the hatred to continue. We can't allow inhumanity to man to continue. We have to help. We have to do something. We should commit ourselves to doing something. My commitment is, by speaking, I keep my family alive. They existed. This is why I speak. This is my 4th time this week. That's why I was a little tired. I spoke for 4 hours yesterday and today on Tuesday. But I want to speak as long as I can because it's important. I want the world to know about the inhumanities that occurred. And unfortunately, I wish that there was a word after the war was over and it said never again. Unfortunately, that is not true. It still continues. This is my family. This was my husband, and he also died on the same day as my father in 1997, on December 30th, 1997. This is my son Neil. He's an assistant district attorney in St. Louis. This is my daughter-in-law Marcy, who is an attorney. This is my granddaughter Jenna, who is doing Teach for America in Brooklyn, New York. This is my son Mark. He worked for Warner Brothers. He was a graduate of Princeton and Yale. This is my granddaughter Julia, who is at Barnard in New York, and that's me, and this is Mark. This is my husband's family, who became my family. I was very fortunate. This is me over here. This is my husband. He was sick already over here. My son Mark was already gone because I'm wearing the red ribbon, which I'm wearing today. This is my son Neil, my daughter-in-law Marcy. That's my granddaughter Jenna and Julia. This is the street where my parents were married in Warsaw, Poland. Of course, after the Warsaw Ghetto, they kept fighting back for 23 days. The Germans couldn't stop them from fighting, so you know what they did? They burnt down all of Warsaw. So this has been rebuilt, but this is where they were married. And actually, there is something very interesting over here. Miller's art. And that's why I took the picture right under that. I went to the camps. I went to Auschwitz. I went to Birkenau. I went to Belzec. And I went to a camp called Majdanek. You can look it up, Google it. It is probably the only camp that is about 80% intact. And there you see what they actually went through. I was sick for about 2 months after I came back from that particular camp. They still have ashes in that camp. And it was not a working camp. What they had a dirt road, and they had one of these, I don't know what you call them, rolling things that go up and down, and the diameter was probably the diameter of this table. And they would have these people go up and down the road. There was a young person that came in to one of the rooms. It was a 3x3, and he said, "Oh, they had heat." It was a torture chamber. You still see blood on the wall. You see those hooks on the wall. Told you about the nails in the crematorium that I saw. There was a man, by the way, Auschwitz had a toilet in the bunk where they were. Majdanek did not. This man, the last person that used the pot, was the one that had to empty it. So what they would do, they would have to go by the fence. And this man went and emptied out the pot. The guard, whoever he was, had a fight with his wife or whatever, told him he didn't like the way he emptied out the pot. This is bitter winter. He's making him undress, take off that uniform that they had, that striped uniform, have him stood naked in front of that fence for 8 hours. And that man survived. He survived. I was there in May. I was wearing jeans. I was wearing a long sleeve t-shirt. I was wearing a sweatshirt. I was wearing a coat. I had one of these rain ponchos. I had a scarf. I had gloves. I was freezing. What these people had to go through. And then you go and you see the hospital. It's immaculate. It's immaculate. That's where they did their experiments. That was a very, very hard trip. My group is going again this year, but I can't do it. Lastly, these are all child survivors. I used to live in Los Angeles. They're my friends. Trudy is the only one that's not around anymore. Trudy didn't find out she was Jewish till she was 21. Her parents converted when she was a little girl. We never had birthday parties or slumber parties, and we decided that we wanted to have one, so we did. And that is my story. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Significance of the doll?
Pardon me?
The doll?
Thank you very much. No, actually it isn't. When Mark died, as I mentioned before, he worked at Warner Brothers, and he was an attorney, and the paralegal adored him. He was a very special person. And one of the gals decided to write a play about him. So my husband and I went and bought them lunch. And Suzanne, who is the person that was going to write the play, heard my accent. And she asked my question, and I told her who I was. So she decided she's going to write a play about Mark and I. So we retraced our steps, and we went back to Paris, where I lived, and the school that I went to. By the way, 1,356 children died from that school that I went to. And this was a grammar school. So at the end of the day, we decided to go to the flea market, and I bought this doll. The doll I had, remember I told you we were very poor. So mine didn't have hair. She didn't have such pretty clothes. She was really very bare, my doll that I had. And when I came back, a friend of mine said to me, "Come to the party." I said, "I bought a doll." She says, "Oh, bring her." So I brought her, and one of the women turned the tag over, and it said, what was my name during the war? Yeah, and what was my friend's name? Which name? Christine was my name. And what was my friend's name? Cecile. Remember I went away with Cecile? Well, that's her name. Christine and Cecile. This is why I bring her. So thank you for asking. By the way, this is a book written by the French government. That's the arrondissement would be comparable to the zip code. And this was the 11e arrondissement. This tells you of all the Jews that were killed during the war, and also the ones that were on the underground, and my brother is in there. So this is the book, and I can show you. I have it here someplace. Any other questions? I expect questions.
I can barely make out what the book's title is.
Pardon me?
I can barely make out what the title of the book is.
Oh, it's called RAF, Internés, Déportés, et Fusillés. It means raid, interned people that were deported, and those that were shot.
All right. Is there an English translation of that, or is that
I just gave it to you.
All right. Sorry.
RAF means raid,
All right.
Interne means people that were interned. Deporte means people that were deported.
All right.
And fusillé means people that were killed.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Now, it's
I can't hear very well, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to come up and try and speak as loudly as you can.
it's true that the German civilians feigned shock that they didn't know about these camps.
Right.
How well do you believe that?
I don't.
Not a bit.
General Eisenhower, who then became our president, I don't know if you know or not, but you can Google it and you can see it. General Eisenhower actually went to the polls around the area of the camp of Auschwitz, and he brought them in because he wanted to show them what happened, even though they denied nothing ever happened. So, no, I don't believe it. And when I went to the camps, the houses were too close. It was impossible for them to deny that they could not see.
You will smell the burning.
Exactly.
And the filth. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I'll come around over there because I have trouble hearing. And I need the exercise. Yeah.
Why didn't you guys have birthday parties and slumber parties?
That was not something to think about. Do you know what we had one Christmas? Arlette and I had an orange for Christmas. And do you know that we had forgotten how to eat the orange? We started to eat it with the skin. Does that tell you why we didn't have birthday presents, why we didn't have birthdays, and why we didn't have slumber parties? We had nothing. We were lucky to be alive. Yes?
Because you saw so many awful things happen to so many people, including gay people, do you think that affected how you felt when you found out your son was gay?
You know, it's a good question. I'm going to answer it very honestly.
Okay.
I worked as a buyer, so I always worked with gay people. They were in the business. It was okay. Do I hear a siren for, is that okay?
It's a test.
Oh, okay. It was okay. And I used to go out to dinner with all my gay friends and so forth and so on. When I found out that it was my son, that was a different story. And I was not ashamed, but I was upset because I adored my son, and I still do. I have his ashes at home, and I talk to him every day, morning and night. But it took me a while to realize that he was more important than his sexual persuasion. And I'm only sorry that I lost him, because the world has lost a wonderful human being.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were you first?
Recommend, you had asked with Holocaust still going on across the country,
Around the world.
around the world, what kind of things do you suggest that people should do? Because sometimes you can create bigger harm to those that are being action taken against them by speaking out.
Well, there are places where you can give money so that you can feed some of those children. And I think you can write to your government and tell them that you don't want to see what is going on, and we should not have women feeding their children and they have no milk in their breast, and little babies that are a year old that weigh 19 pounds. We should not allow this. So let's all write our congressmen. Let them know how we feel and let them do something. We spend money for wars. Let's spend the money for good things for a change.
When you came to be adopted, or the plan was that you would be adopted, did you get to have continued contact with your aunt after that?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, my aunt came in 1950. And I really didn't want her to come to the United States. I wanted to go back to France because I was in foster homes. And I was very unhappy. I was also very difficult, I'll have to admit. But I was very unhappy. I wanted her to stay in France, but she decided to come to the United States in 1950, and that's when I got married. I got married when I was 17. And fortunately, I had a very nice husband, and I had a wonderful family, so I was lucky, and I had 2 wonderful children. What's the other? You said you had a lot of questions.
Oh, no, I've
Oh,
asked you a lot.
okay. Any more questions? Oh, Tom,
Earlier when we were talking, you were relaying an experience about being in a room.
you've got to talk louder, remember?
Earlier when we were talking, you were relaying an experience about being in a room with somebody that had ties to Germany.
Oh, you want me to tell the story about Axel? Oh, okay. I was asked a question, how do I feel about the Germans? And that's a question that is asked very, very often. And I often say that anyone over the age of 80, as far as I'm concerned, I find them responsible. Anyone before the age of 80, they were young children, even if they were in their teens, you know, they were made to do whatever their parents told them to do. I was at a conference, and I was in a wheelchair for 11 years, and I was in a scooter, sitting in the back, and this very handsome young man, jet black hair, blue eyes with a ponytail, was standing, and he was sobbing. And I said to him, "Who's your mother? Who's your father?" And he said to me, "I'm German." He was German. So I said to him, "What are you doing here? Get out." He says, "I'm ashamed." He says, "I'm ashamed from what my parents did." He says, "My father was in the SS." So we were about 250 people. I said, "Do you want to go and speak to everybody?" He said, "Yes." And he went and took the microphone, and he told everybody how ashamed he was of what his parents did. And he wanted to help the Jews. He wanted to work with the Jews. And as I told Tom, he really fixed it for his father. Not only did he help the Jews, but he married a black girl. So he really took care of his father, the SS. Of course, he was disowned by the family. Any other questions? Yes.
You said the name of the person who you were at for the farm. I didn't hear that clearly. Was it Teal?
Madame Thiel was Cecile's mother. The lady from the farm, I unfortunately forgot her name. And every time I tell her story, and I usually say that when I tell the story, I bless her soul, because the German that sent out an edict, anyone that was hiding a Jewish child, they would pay them 300 francs if they reported them to the police. By that time, my aunt had contacted me, and this lady, God rest her soul, sent a letter to my aunt and said, "Should I report her to the police?" And my aunt said, "No, please do not." And she sent her the 300 francs. But I don't remember her name, but I do bless her soul every time I tell my story. So this time she was blessed 4 times, because this is my 4th time this week. Any more questions? I'm coming. You can come in and sit down now, if you wish. Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this. I'm amazed at what you've been through and how well you've conducted yourself and how well you've spoken and the stories that you've told.
Thank you.
I have a question, and if it's too sensitive, just tell me to shut up. I wanted to know, how did this affect your faith?
My faith?
Since you are Jewish.
Yes, I'm still Jewish, and I do believe in God. I do believe in a supreme being, yes. I do believe in God. But I don't believe in religions. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in God, which is quite different.
Yes, thank you. And thank you again for being here.
Any more questions? Well, all I can say is thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to tell my story to you and for listening. And God bless you all. And remember, let's do something about what needs to be done. We have a responsibility. Thank you.
And on behalf of everybody, we just want to thank you again so much for coming and for sharing your wisdom and your courage with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.